from Maryland. Yeah, now you're good.
Okay. My name is Marilyn Yuval, and I'm Vice Chair of the Corps, and I'll be conducting the meeting today. With respect to call to order, Chair, well, Kurt Kawafuji,
Here. Yeah.
Carl Bonham,
Present.
Jack Sudahad,
Here.
Christy Maynard,
Here.
Wendell Lee.
Here.
I guess Wendell, it's hard to hear you, I guess.
Oh. Let me pull the mic closer. I'm here.
And Scott Hayashi.
Here.
Okay. I believe we have a quorum. Next, I'd like to see if there's any communication to the council and if there's any public comments.
There is none.
There's none. Okay, minutes of the meeting of September 7th, 2021 has been circulated. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the minutes of the meeting of September 7th, 2021. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Okay. We'll have a discussion and vote on total personal income forecast for calendar year 2021. And for this, Seth, did you want to start, or should, I guess,
I can, why don't I just begin with the present forecast of the Corps for the TPI. So
Okay.
for 2021, and again, this is for calendar year, the Corps TPI forecast is 2%. And for 2022, the calendar year, the forecast is negative 2%.
So
Okay.
one thing that the council should be aware of is that all the data was revised and income data, GDP data, all got pretty significant revisions. And at least in the work that we do with our models, that old 2% 2021 forecast is probably too low. I think our current forecast from our model is 4.5%. The other thing that happened is that, I mean, part of that is also the result of us doing some recalculation of how the data is being reported for the PPP loans. That doesn't include any expectation of changes in rules that might come about from federal legislation that's still being debated. So anyway, the current forecast in our model is 4.5% and still minus 2% for next year. Actually, it's minus 1.8% for next year.
Carl,
I
can I
guess-
ask why it's still negative for calendar year 2020 with all the inflationary pressures?
So basically in calendar year 2022, we have labor earnings, right? So all the payrolls and growing almost 5%. But we have transfer payments falling from almost 20 billion in the second quarter of this year to about 16, a little bit over 16 billion for next year. So transfer payments in the first quarter of this year were a little bit over 27 billion. They were at 19.5 billion in second quarter. We think they're going to be about 18.5 in Q3 and about 16 and a half in Q4 and fall and then remain at that. And that's that's assuming that the expanded child tax credit and earned income tax credit all go away, as is current law. That's taking into account the increased Social Security benefits that are going to be paid out and with the new pay raises. But still, that's, for the whole year from 2021 to 2022, you're going from a number of 20 billion, slightly over 20, almost 21 billion in transfer payments, down to about 16 billion. And that's the primary driver. So nominal earnings are going up as we add jobs and more people go back to work, but transfer payments are just, it's just the reversal of all that stimulus.
Okay, well, thank you.
I'm a little surprised that you have such a strong number for 2021, because I think in earlier forecasts just a month ago, it was a negative number, right? So,
Yep.
and that's what you're talking about, looking at how some of the information is classified.
No, 2021 was I think the last forecast was, actually I can tell you what it was. It was 2%. So it is significantly stronger now. And there's a couple different reasons. One was that in the old revised data, 2020 was a much stronger year. So the revision took almost 2 percentage points out of the growth rate from 2019 to 2020. So the new data is weaker, and as a result, the 2021 level so actually the 2021 level in our new forecast is almost 2 billion lower than it was in our old forecast, but the growth rate is higher.
I'm looking at the UHERO forecast from September. And that is showing a minus 1.1.
That's real. I'm talking nominal because this forecast is nominal.
Okay. That explains it. Thank you.
Yeah, because and our inflation forecast is going up as well, which is
Right.
helping to pull up the nominal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Could you tell me how, there's a lot of vacancies now, people looking for employees, and it seems like we lost some of our workforce. Or they're not
We've
working
lost-
because of government incentives to, just basically payments going out to people so they feel they don't have to work. And I note that there are baby boomers who have decided to retire. So I was wondering how that factors into your figures.
So we've lost 35,000 people from the labor force since before the pandemic. So yeah, and for all the reasons that you mentioned, right? We have people who retired, like some of my colleagues who threw in the towel. And we have people who are sitting on the sidelines. They're not in a rush to go find a job because they got some assistance, they have a partner or a spouse who's working full time, and they know there are good jobs out there, and what's the rush? There's all kinds of things going on, and a lot of people switching careers too, changing from one field to another. So the way that all plays out, in the first place, we don't really know what the heck's going to happen to the labor force, right? So we don't know how many of those retirees are full-blown real retirees and they'll never come back, and how many of them will come back in some capacity. We don't know how many single parents are going to be back in the workforce because COVID is mostly more under control, more of endemic, and the kids are all back at school and everybody's vaccinated. There's a lot that's changing, but in what it means in our model is that we're not going to have as much employment, right? So total, you don't expect to get back to the same number of jobs that you had before. And if that's true, you're also going to be paying those people more. right? And we are seeing that. We're seeing it more in some sectors than others. It's pretty hard to sort out how much is real and how much is still leftover effects of stimulus, because some of that is showing up in income by sector because it's in proprietors' income. But basically, you end up with fewer people, higher wages, and there has to be some increase in productivity, which may also be because of what we're doing right now. Right? You didn't have to get on a plane to come to Oahu and waste half your day for a hour meeting. So it's all in the models. But what, I can't tell you what's going to happen to the labor force two years down the road. That's sort of the $1 million question, right? It may very well be the most unclear piece of the economy right now is really what's going on in the labor market.
I guess,
And
yeah,
I would add that the number of jobs has fallen more than the number of unemployed people. So a lot of those second and third jobs
Yeah.
have not been recovered.
So statewide, we're about 82,000 jobs below
Right.
where we were at the start of the pandemic. And yet, it's interesting that in the most recent data on job openings and labor market turnover, if I remember correctly, there were almost 19,000 people in Hawaii who quit their job in August. And now, why would you do that? Well, that's how you get a pay raise, unfortunately, right? In many cases, that's how you end up in a better job, is by moving. And I don't necessarily mean moving physically, but changing jobs. And there's good evidence nationally that that's what's happening. The people who are changing jobs are seeing their hourly wages go up 1 to 2 percentage points more than everybody else. And they may very well be seeing better working conditions as well.
Carl, in terms of the TPI growth rates, I'm looking at the Bureau of Economic Analysis tables, and they're showing negative 26% for Q2 on Q1 for 2021, annualized rates. So with a negative 75% for transfer receipts. So
that sounds, let's see. I see transfer receipts going from 27.4 billion to 19.4 billion.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So about 8 billion down in terms of transfer receipts.
Yeah, and total income. Oh, I'm not looking at it annual. I'm only looking at it annually, but let's see.
Total personal income down by almost 7 billion. So
from 9.2 billion to 8.5. Yeah.
92 to 85.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah, almost 7 billion.
Yeah. So how are we getting a +2 in this?
Well, remember this is year over year. So Q1 was 92 billion compared to 77 billion the previous year. Q2 is just a little bit below the Q2 of 2020, and Q3 and Q4 of 2020 were 83 billion and 82 billion. And we think
you average those out.
Yeah, I mean it's I mean we're using the same quarterly data, and then the other thing is that Q3 was a strong quarter for Hawaii. Right, not in terms of transfer payments. So our estimate for transfer payments in Q3 is almost the same as Q4, right? And that's because basically by Q2, the big change from Q1 to Q2 was the end of the direct payments to households, and the end of the unemployment benefits didn't happen until September. Right. So most of the drop had already happened. And then in Q3, you also get the child tax credit and earned income tax credits kick in. that weren't there in the first half of the year. So basically, most of the drop in the transfer payments happened in the second quarter. There's going to be another drop in the fourth quarter because of the end of unemployment benefits. But then Q3 was stronger in the labor market, and we think Q4 is basically flat in the labor market. In terms of people going back to work.
And how have you guys considered or taken into consideration the slowdown in tourism in August and September? Or certainly September and probably October too.
So, like has happened every single time we've done a forecast, as soon as we release it, it's old news and wrong. And, when we came out with our forecast in the forecast we released in September was really those numbers were finalized really the end of August or third week of August, right at the peak of Delta, when the hoteliers were all crying about all their cancellations. And that was actually, that wasn't the peak of cancellations, and so our forecast for tourism was too weak. The September numbers came in quite a bit stronger than we thought they would. And maybe that was because they weren't staying in hotels, they were staying in Airbnbs or something, and October numbers already picked up. So October daily visitors are about 1,000 visitors per day more than were in September. That's still not as strong as you normally see from seasonal effects, but it's moving the right direction. So basically our forecast right now for the rest of this year is the same as our optimistic forecast was when we released it in the last report. So it still has a strong Thanksgiving and a strong Christmas, and it basically gets us back to 2019 levels of arrivals for December. And every time we've released a forecast, our baseline forecast for tourism has been too weak.
Okay. And when you say arrivals, you mean total arrivals?
Correct.
Including foreign.
Everybody, but it'll still be primarily U.S.
domestic.
Yeah. There'll be an increase in international in the fourth quarter. It may be mostly Canadians. Hopefully, some Japanese will come for the marathon, and hopefully the Japanese will change their rules soon because they're about as out of date as the state rules were 3 weeks ago, and so the visitor numbers are stronger than we anticipated, but the job numbers are about the same. And that's sort of been the same model each time, is that visitors come in stronger, but the job market recovers a little bit more slowly. And so we essentially have a pause in employment and a pause in any kind of income growth in Q4, and then resumption in 2022.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Carl. Could it be also that we have lost some of the jobs because, for example, in the hotels, they cut back on the housekeeping and services, that people are paying higher prices now, but the services that are provided by individuals have gone down?
Sure. Yeah. That's definitely what's happening. That's definitely one of the things that's happening. And it's not just hotels. You go into a restaurant, and it depends on the type of restaurant, but in many of them, you go in and one example, I'm not going to name the restaurant, but you go in and you actually go up to a serving counter and check in and place your order, and you don't actually have your own wait staff anymore. They have like roaming waiters and waitresses, and they'll buzz you can buzz them on your cell phone if you need something, but there's half as many wait staff, and that you get a number and they bring you your food, but it's a different experience. And so they're saving costs. And same thing in the hotels. I just got back from Kauai, and it was actually pretty interesting. I hadn't been in a hotel since COVID started, and it's like the amenities are gone. And you had to call the front desk to get glasses, something to drink water out of. And yeah, so you're right. There are fewer people who have been brought back to work, but more importantly, in the current, like the most near term, it's the loss of hours for people who were already brought back to work, right? Their hours got cut back pretty significantly during the Delta downturn. I mean, the good thing is that the Delta downturn was short, right? It was deep, it was short, and you know, our recovery from that has been really, really sharp and pronounced. And you know, you may not know this, but there's less than 60,000 people in this state who are eligible to get vaccinated who haven't started a shot. It's pretty astounding. I mean, we're going to be at a very high level of vaccination by Thanksgiving, and you know, we may see another wave, but it's not like it's going to be on the mainland where you're going to see real hot spots. So I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about 2022 because of, and actually just in the last couple of days, the rate, so the 7-day average of people initiating a vaccination, getting their first shot, in the last 2 days, it's the highest it's been since the beginning of August, back at the very start of Delta. And I was told that some large employers' vaccine mandates just kicked in. The vaccine mandates work. It may also be because of the mayor's rules, right? You can go to a UH football game if you're vaccinated now. Maybe that's drawing some people to go get vaccinated.
Hey, Carl, have you guys done any estimates on the impact on employment if they removed any of the restrictions on restaurants in terms of going from 50% capacity to 100% capacity?
We have not tried to do that. Yeah, it's a good question. And, you know, frankly, okay, I don't need to go off on my interpretation of the rules, but I mean, fully vaccinated restaurant seems to me like we ought to be able to go more than 50% capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been operating on the Big Island and Kauai without those rules. They're still at 50%, but they don't have the vaccination and the testing rules that we have. And you haven't seen a big surge. And on Maui, they have the rules for outdoors, but much less vaccinated. So I think there's room for continued relaxation, and I think we'll get there. Then the question will be whether people want to go back and work in the restaurants where all the customers are mean to them.
So despite the fact that there's all this, well, I guess you're optimistic about the increase in tourism and the increase in wages, and that would be offset by the loss of jobs, I guess.
Well, it should. So continued growth and strengthening of visitor spending, getting back international visitor spending, right? Allowing for more activities, particularly on Oahu with weddings and with events. All of those things broaden the scope. I mean, they get you back to closer to what tourism used to be like. That all creates the need for employees. And the question is, will those employees be there? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons why the employees should be there. One is the support from the federal government is pretty much over. Two, wages are going up. Whether they can keep up with inflation, we'll have to see. And three, that childcare is opening back up. Kids are back at school. There's less concern about catching COVID. It's all of the conditions seem like they're moving into a place where if people are going to come back into the labor force, it should start happening. Cross your fingers.
So Carl, the numbers that you threw out, which were 2 and negative 2, right?
That was last time.
Okay.
So it's
This time
4.5 and -2.
4.5 and -2, and those are nominal numbers.
Correct.
Okay, so 4.5. I mean, if inflation's 4, which, or, you know, we're talking still about almost zero real growth.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, in real terms, so we don't, inflation is 4 in the second half of the year. It's not 4 in the first half of the year. So we get 1% real in 2021 and minus 5% real in 2022.
Oh, what percentage of the workforce is not working that was working before the pandemic? In terms of numbers and.
Well, so
percentage?
if you held the labor force, so what is not working? If you kept the labor force constant, and then you only looked at the decline in employment, you'd have a 10% unemployment rate. But the labor force went down, and it went down so much that the unemployment rate is 6%.
So the unemployment rate doesn't capture. It's a little bit,
It's a convoluted statistic.
yeah, it doesn't capture the reduction in the workforce.
Well, it does, but the reduction in the workforce means that it's just the ratio of, it's the percentage of people in the labor force who aren't working, right? So they have to be looking for a job. So how big is your labor force? What percentage is working is the employment rate. What percentage isn't working is the unemployment rate. So if the labor force gets smaller, right, for the same number of people working, your unemployment rate's lower.
That's why I think it's sometimes more interesting to look at the job count numbers.
Yeah, or employment to population or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the unemployment rate is just a messy statistic.
Because you earlier threw out a number of 65,000, right? Something like that wasn't working.
Well, the number of jobs, so total payroll jobs is about 82,000 below where it was at the start of the pandemic. So in February of 2020 till now, I'm pretty sure we're 82,000 fewer jobs.
And that's a big number.
Those are filled.
That's a huge number.
Those are,
It's a huge
filled
number.
jobs.
Huge number.
Yeah, I think it's 14% below where it was pre-pandemic.
Mhm.
So that goes into our growth rate, right? Or
Well, yeah.
because that's total income of all people working, right? That's what we're capturing.
That's why income in 2021 is still positive, and then it's negative in 2022, because the only thing, so if you took out, if you took out the benefits that were paid out in transfer payments, yeah, we would, the situation would be very different.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, transfer payments basically went from averaging around 13 billion to a peak of about 27 billion. And now we think they're going to settle at about 16 billion after the pandemic, because of more people retired on Social Security, more people on Medicaid, and other changes.
What goes into the growth rate? It's a bunch of factors, but it's inflation, it's the number of jobs, transfer payments, that all factors in, right?
Dividends. Total personal income is the sum of earnings by place of work. So that's wages, right? Also benefits, right? So if healthcare costs have gone up and employers are paying more in benefits, all that adds in. And that's where that's your primary driver for the inflation piece, right? So there's earnings by place of work. There's personal transfer payments, which is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of that federal stimulus, the direct payments to household, the unemployment insurance, all of that stuff goes into transfer payments, and then add in dividends, interest, and rent. And the dividends, interest, and rent piece is actually pretty weak. Not too surprising. Rent is not as big of a piece of that as you might think. I can't remember what the proportions are, but that's not just, that's dividends, interest, and rent earned on that individuals earn no matter where they hold the assets. right? It doesn't have to be rent of Hawaii properties.
So what do you think?
Oh.
Is 4% a good number for 2021?
So Christy, have you looked at, I don't know if DBET has released an updated forecast, probably not since the numbers all got revised. That's the big challenge for 2021. The data revisions were,
Yeah, I have looked at their numbers and they, let's see. They're showing for real growth of minus 1.7 for 2021.
yeah, and ours is now -1.
And but personal growth is 0.9. So I don't know if it was, so inflation rate of 2.6, I guess.
Oh. Yeah, my hunch is that their inflation rate will be high. I mean, it's all, the data changed a lot, so
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
Are we forecasting a real number or a nominal?
Nominal.
So what do you think, you guys? Is 4% a good number?
Works for me.
Should I make that a motion?
Same here, it just gets us flat, right? So
2021.
If you move, I'll second.
I so move.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the total personal income forecast for calendar year 2021 be 4%. Is there any discussion? Further discussion? If not, could I call for the vote? Kurt,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes,
Jack,
Yes.
Christy,
Yes.
Wendell,
yes,
Scott?
Yes.
Okay, and for me, I'll also agree. So it's been, I guess, unanimous that the total personal income forecast for calendar year 2021 be 4%. Could we now go on to the discussion about the total personal income forecast for calendar year 2022? Carl, did you want to say something about next year?
well, just if you want to bet on whether or not the Congress will move forward with some version of, I mean, I think that they're going to get something passed. Who knows how big it will be, but I'll be a little surprised if they don't continue the child tax credit. I just have a hard time, and there will be some stimulus in the form of infrastructure spending. A lot of that won't really hit in 2022. It'll take some time for that to work through. But the other thing that I guess tapers some of our negativity about 2022 is just that the federal money that's in the system, that's not in personal income per se, right? The stuff that goes to government agencies and then works its way through into personal income is still being spent. And it didn't all get spent in 2021. And in some cases, they have multiple years to spend it. I think Department of Transportation probably has 2 or 3 or 4 years to spend the American Rescue Plan. I think that's what it was called, money. There was a real effort to try and focus on spending it well rather than spending it fast. And so that would argue that our old -2, our current is -1.8, might be a little bit too pessimistic. And also the other thing is just that, I mean, the bottom line is that the labor market is going to hold a big key, both how much wages go up and how many people go back to work. So I guess I would move maybe -1.5.
Of course, given that we increased our baseline for 2021, that's still substantially higher than where we would have been.
Carl, if that was a motion, I'll second it.
It was.
Okay,
Negative.
-1.5.
If it's been moved and seconded that the personal income forecast for calendar year 2022 be -1.8. Is there
Oh.
discussion on this?
It was 1.5 was the
1.5.
motion.
1.5.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this? All right, excuse me, Carl, were you assuming that we're going to have something passed?
No, that was just discussion. So actually in our forecast, and this is mostly, it does have some impact on the tail end of 2022, but in the forecasts that the forecast that we released in the Q3 and the one we're working on now does assume that we will see an increase in government spending on construction.
Okay, but nothing for the social.
No, we have not made any assumptions there at all. I was just tossing that out for discussion, for reason to be more optimistic.
Well,
You're always optimistic, Carl.
yeah, that's true.
You should go back and look at our forecast from the beginning of the pandemic.
A trillion here, a trillion there, it starts to add up.
And you know that if you look for a place for optimism, I really think it's going to come from in the form of international visitors returning with some pent up demand in a pretty big way. And you know so we have a
Wouldn't
first.
that be great?
We have
Yeah.
a first and a second. Did anybody second the -1.5?
I think Carl did.
Okay.
No, I did.
No,
Jack did.
Jack did.
Right. I made the first, right.
Jack.
Yeah, so we were in the discussion mode and yeah, so
What do you
maybe-
think, Marilyn?
Well, you know, the whole economy, I'm just very uncomfortable with the stock market where it is, the amount of the deficit, and the supply chain disruptions. I'm just bothered by where we are in the economy and how that would affect jobs and personal income. That's my thing is right now, I feel like we're kind of like at the edge of a bowl and the marble could go out or could stay in depending upon factors beyond our control. I guess it's, you know, if you read all the things I read, things don't look that great, you know, as far as
Stop reading.
Well, no, I mean the Chinese.
Somebody needs to curate a reading list for Maryland.
Oh.
Facebook.
Yeah, but if you read all of that, you know, about the stock market, about the, you know, the Chinese real estate companies that are about to default on their loans and the, you know, the ripple effect on the global economy, then you kind of get a little bit worried about, hey, how is this going to affect the US? And they're saying that any defaults and, you know, could ripple effect to the economy. And then we're going to end up with some bankruptcies, I guess, in the banking sector too. So.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the U.S. banking sector's exposure.
Yeah.
You know, when we were.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there is some exposure. yeah, there's always something to worry about. That would not be first on my list. I think that one of the bigger risks may very well be a spike in interest rates. And, that has the dual effect of potentially driving down the stock market and driving down wealth there, and also slowing housing, which has been, been a pretty strong influence so far, and diminish home construction. But that's, the amount of accumulated savings and wealth is pretty enormous, and the supply chain issues is a big deal, obviously, and it's lasted longer than I think anybody expected, largely because we saw the Delta wave. I actually read a piece today in Bloomberg from a shipping company that said they're actually seeing shipping volumes through the West Coast increase for the first time, and are seeing improvement. This particular CEO was predicting that we were past the worst of it. So we'll see. To me, still the biggest wild card for overall economic growth is what is really going on in the labor market, because we worry about these supply chain issues. Those will get worked out. But if this reduction in the labor force ends up being permanent, I don't think it is, but if it were, then you have multiple years of inflation ahead of you through wage push inflation, and but then that would mean our income forecast is probably too low because it's a nominal income forecast.
Right.
One other thing that I worry about is as you were saying, the return of the foreign visitors, because they're the ones who tend to stay in the hotels. They're the ones who spend more money. And in particular, the Chinese, are they going to be coming back? Because I think on a per day spending basis, they are some of the highest spenders. So that'll be interesting if they're going to come back.
I don't know that they're allowed right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They might not
exactly.
be allowed back. There's a lot. we're it's almost like a Cold War now. And that's the other thing that is going to be affecting trade. That we have not the best relations with China. And I guess we have a problem with chips. If you're in business and you're trying to find a computer, a new computer, it's very hard. So a lot of things that, business people face that they have to do business. The supply chain thing is pretty bad, because when you want to have something shipped over, it's not like you usually get things shipped over very easily. Things are out. If you want to buy a new computer, my husband says, nope, we can't, there's none for sale. And the cars, you can see they really aren't selling very many cars. So all of this supply chain disruption, to me, affects the whole economy and affects people's jobs, I guess. And so that's, when I'm looking into the future next year, those are all the clouds that are coming over our economy here, even if we have gotten over the COVID hurdle. So the Evergrande and the overextension of the real estate companies in China is what I'm concerned of, the ripple effect of that. Well, I think Christy would know about that, right?
Oh, I don't know. I was just I just wonder if Scott and Wendell had any. I don't want to be the only one talking.
Wendell, do you have anything?
Yeah, it's funny. I hear what you guys are saying. I know a lot of the dealership owners, and it's interesting. They're on the higher level. They're telling me, yeah, our dealerships are empty, but we're selling every car that comes through. So people are ordering cars now and picking them up. I just ordered another car. It'll come in 4 to 5 months, which is not bad considering the shortage. So people are getting what they want, and their turnaround on the higher end vehicles is quite incredible. And so some of the owners told me, Wendell, we've cut down the number of staff. We've cut down the interaction. People know what they want and they're paying cash. It's quite incredible what's happening from that standpoint. If you go to Ala Moana, I was looking at another Rolex. There are no Rolexes in that store. It is completely empty. So high-end
I did not know
demand.
that.
Yeah, you go to Ala Moana, check it out. I've never seen it like that. It is just bare. And so I did some research, and it's not because Rolex is having a chip shortage, it's because Rolex only makes so many watches a year and they sold them all out. And so they're not going to make any more until next year, until their new crop comes out. So we're seeing something that I think is very unusual, where it's just Americans' demands are so high.
Interesting.
They're just buying everything. There's just like a hunger to buy stuff regardless of what the cost is, and they're getting it. They just have to wait a little longer. It's just really weird.
That's a really good example, because a sizable piece of the supply chain problem is, and this is, that's not an example of it, as Wendell pointed out, it's an example of demand shooting up, but the supply chain problem is being created by shifting demand, because, during the pandemic, you didn't go to the theater, you didn't go to the restaurants, you didn't travel, and instead you spent the money on durables, right? And there was federal stimulus that then encouraged, not just the wealthy, but everybody to spend more money on durables, whether it's a flat screen TV or a new computer or an Apple Watch or whatever the heck it is. And getting those goods to the country was hampered by real supply chain issues, which were already at some pretty tight capacity before the pandemic, and then got hit by port closures and truck drivers who can't get licensed to drive their truck. They can get trained, but they can't get the license because the DMV shut down, and all those things together. So when the demand shifts back, right? So as people start spending money on travel and start spending money on going out, that by itself will help to reduce the supply chain. They'll stop waiting in line for something with a new computer chip and start waiting in line to see a Broadway show. And I just looked up so the Fed has been talking with banks, in their regulatory role about exposure to the Evergrande situation. And at least according to what they found, Jerome Powell said there's no direct United States exposure, and even big Chinese banks are not tremendously exposed. European Central Bank president said the same thing. So we really have to work on Maryland's reading list.
Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal.
Well, that's part of the problem.
I have also read, regarding the chip shortage, that modern cars now use twice as many as before. So it's not just that they're there's a shortage, but that we are needing more for the same thing.
And what's interesting
the construction
about that,
process, it's just-in-time construction means that you get hit by a shock and it's going to take a while for it to work out.
Yeah.
But the drive, the higher prices create the incentive to work out and solve that problem. And as long as we, if we don't get another wave that causes factories to shut down and ports to shut down.
And there's another factor in the car industry, it's called the Tesla effect. They have not been short on chips.
But Wendell, I think the difference with Tesla is basically because they don't use as many chips. So that's the other thing. So,
they use less
that
chips.
it's creating, I think there may be a shift in the future as electric vehicles are being developed from the ground up, is that's how Tesla designed it. It's basically
Exactly.
a supercomputer sitting there rather than multiple chips running the headlights, running the windshield wipers, running the air conditioning. So rather than having multiple chips, it's one large
And they've
large chip.
stolen, yeah, I agree with you. And they've stolen a huge share from the luxury market. I mean, we're talking about $1 trillion valuation now for Tesla, which is quite amazing.
Until Musk sent his tweet last night about the Hertz contract not getting signed. So
Oops.
that took a
That's
3% off.
100,000 vehicles, yeah.
Well, he just raised the price on the Model S by 5,000, like nothing, and they're still selling them. Yeah.
And that's the thing. So, that's what I was going to mention is that, I think that the Carl's point, I think inflation is a bigger issue because yes, supply chain issues are happening, but people are paying, right? They're because the demand is scarce, and the cars, Wendell, to your point, I mean, they're selling them and they're not discounting them. I mean, the days of going in and haggling over price, I mean, those are gone. I mean, they're list price plus.
Well,
now,
they're gone for now. And the question is,
true.
how transitory this period is.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a labor market issue, as Carl
Yep.
pointed out earlier. So
Exactly.
we've got
One day
negative
some
1.5 on the table.
Okay, yeah, yes.
And when you throw in some inflation there, that means real, we're talking even greater
Yeah, -5.
decline.
Right. And
So-
Yeah, so that's
that's
the real drop is completely consistent with Maryland's concerns.
Mhm.
Except it's not coming from those, it's coming from the transfer payments.
right. Seems reasonable to me.
Okay,
Let's vote.
you ready to vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Kurt? We have a motion.
You're on mute.
Oh,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes,
Jack,
yes.
Christie,
Yes.
Wendell,
Yes.
and Scott?
Yes.
Okay, and I also will vote yes. So we have a unanimous vote for negative 1.5 for the calendar year 2022. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is scheduling for the next core meeting. For general
That's
fund.
general
revenue.
fund, right?
Yes. I think that's in January. Is that correct?
Yes,
What's the reporting date set on that?
it's the 10th.
Does January 6th work out for people and for getting a letter ready?
Mm,
When would we have the monthly for December?
Not before the 6th. However, we can provide you whether you Wednesday or Thursday, we can basically get you a number that's like good enough. You just won't have all the I mean, it might be $1 million off, but
So when is the report due?
The
10th.
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 Which is a Monday.
This is
Yes.
Monday. So if it was okay with you guys, I would prefer you do the 6th, but like and then I would really need your coordination, Kurt and Marilyn,
Okay,
to be done to get it out on the 7th, right?
yeah.
If you felt like you needed more time, then I would feel more comfortable doing it on the 5th.
I think we were pretty good, right, at getting back to you.
Yep,
next
we
day,
can do
yeah.
it. Mhm,
Yeah, so I think,
we can do it.
Marilyn, how's the 6th at 2:00?
That works for me.
Works for me.
Me too.
Okay. I'm not sure when I had my meeting, but okay,
No traveling for me. Try to get to Disneyland and it's just booked for the whole year in 2022.
Wow.
you're going to Disneyland.
Pent
Yeah,
up demand.
Amazing.
New cars, Rolexes.
I want to go shopping with
No,
Wendell.
I just passed by and saw that. I did get a new car, but yeah, that's okay.
hey, no travel, gotta
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
helping
that's
the
right.
economy. What's the problem? That was the idea. That's the deal.
Yeah,
You get money, spend it,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, the 6th is fine.
So at 2 o'clock, right, Marilyn?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Sounds
I guess
good.
my seminar on the 4th and 5th, so 6 would be fine.
Aloha.
Is that okay with all of you?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. January 6th, 2 p.m.
Okay, Marilyn, just a reminder, yeah, you need to adjourn the meeting.
Okay. I guess I move to
Meeting
adjourn the
adjourned.
meeting.
So moved.
Ooh,
Yeah,
Happy
second.
Thanksgiving, yeah.
Vote with
Jack?
your click.
Okay,
Thank you, everybody.
okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Happy
everybody.
Thanksgiving. Yep,
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Everybody, happy Thanksgiving.
bye.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.